back, listeners, to another beautiful episode of the Mindful Living Podcast. I'm your host, Sana, and today we are going to talk about a very, very interesting topic. So, listeners, today, it's going to be definitely a very, very interesting conversation because we are going to understand how our bodies can be our best medicine. And uh, let me introduce my guest to all of you, Dr. Marissa Heisel, with over 25 years of experience. Dr. Marissa lives by her motto, "You are your own best medicine." That's what we're going to understand today. She's guiding women and anyone seeking renewal on a transformative journey of self discovery and conscious living. Now, drawing from her background in chiropractic care, midwifery, and child development, she integrates natural healing modalities such as bioenergetic therapies, essential oils, nutrition, herbalism, and holistic health practices. So, this particular conversation is going to be really, really insightful, really interesting because I have learned through so many conversation listeners that our bodies have a unique, beautiful way of healing itself. So, with that, Dr. Marisa, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really honored to have you here with us.
Anna, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Dr. Marisa, to begin with, I guess this will be automatically the first question in our minds. I mean, we are completely into the conventional healthcare system. We have medicines to help us suppress the symptoms or quickly fix the problems out there. But how exactly our body can be our own medicine? I mean, it kind of is like counterintuitive.
Remember that not that long ago, what we now consider conventional medicine didn't exist. It really wasn't until 1913 when the Flexner Report was created that essentially created modern medicine as we understand it. And prior
Mm.
to that, healing relied so much more on a much more natural approach. So this
Mhm.
whole concept of the medical industrial complex as being medicine is in itself it's a little bit of a fallacy. That medical industrial complex has really systematically conditioned generations of people to distrust our own bodies and our inner wisdom. And it's created a lifelong dependence on external authorities while suppressing the innate healing intelligence that exists within every human being. And my assertion is that there are two critical phases in a woman's life where you see this most. And I believe that the reason for this is to ensure that women never fully claim their power. It begins by targeting mothers and children to establish early compliance and dependency on the medical system. And then it strikes again around midlife, particularly around perimenopause and menopause, when a woman's
Mhm.
natural wisdom and intuition and authority would otherwise emerge most powerfully. So
Mhm.
when I talk about you are your own best medicine, it really challenges that medical industrial complex's fundamental lie that healing comes from outside interventions rather than supporting your body's innate wisdom. And if you'd like, I can explain a little bit more about how I frame that and what that looks like for me.
Yeah, please go ahead, Dr. Marissa.
So my philosophy, and this isn't something I pulled out of thin air. This is based on 26 years of working directly with women and children in my practice, is that we are the ultimate experts on our own well-being because we have access to data that no external authority possesses. We know our history, our body's subtle signals. If we're mothers, we understand our children's authentic patterns and when they've strayed from those patterns. And we have this deep inner knowing when something isn't right, even when conventional medicine then dismisses your concerns. The number of women, literally in the hundreds, who have been told by medical doctors in my practice over the years that there's nothing wrong with them or that something other than what's wrong with them must be going on, or they must just
Mhm.
be stressed, or they must just be hormonal. Um, but we know when something isn't right, and we know when something isn't right when our children. But more importantly, you are your most powerful healer when you're willing to do the deep work that conventional medicine cannot and that it avoids. Addressing root causes, healing trauma, eliminating toxic exposure, and really reconnecting with the healing intelligence that our body has been using our entire lives, that we are created from. Now, this isn't about rejecting all medical care, it's about reclaiming our sovereignty and building resilience rather than dependency. My deep, deep belief is that human beings are far, far, far more powerful than we begin to understand or to realize. And when we are, when our inner belief in ourselves, when our inner knowing, when our intuition, when that inner wisdom is discounted from the time that we are born, we never truly come to a place of understanding what our true power is. So again, it's not that there's never a need for outside in medicine, a need to take pharmaceuticals occasionally, a need to take plant medicine, herbs, homeopathics, Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine. There are times when all of these things are incredibly powerful. But most of those medicines have been around for thousands of years, predate modern medicine, and help our body to establish balance and to heal, as opposed to destroying our awareness of our body so that we don't think we're feeling something while they cause significant secondary side effects. That's the difference for me.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, initially it can be overwhelming, but I imagine this can be really very empowering because if we believe we have everything we need, um, we might also feel pressure to figure it out all alone. But then, at least we have that accessibility to the fact that, our bodies do have this innate ability. So, yeah.
It's not about figuring it out on your own.
Mm.
It's a shift from the concept of people walking into my office and saying, fix me, doc." This belief that we are broken inherently. It's a shift
Mhm.
away from that to a position that we are powerful and capable of healing, even if we are unwell, that the work that needs to be done is not just this outside in, take a pharmaceutical drug or get surgery or even take supplements and herbs. There is deep work that needs to be done internally to help us uncover where this has come from. Most illnesses do not happen overnight. Most disease processes do not happen overnight. Our body speaks to us in whispers for months, years, sometimes decades, that there is something we need to be paying attention to. And when we continue to either ignore or believe that there's nothing wrong, or don't want to take the time, or just don't want to look at something because it's uncomfortable, eventually our body starts throwing bricks at our head. And that's when we really feel it. And that's when it seems like an emergency. But this, whatever it is, has been often, not always, but often building for years. And we have the ability to go back and look at, where did this start? With what mindset? With what trauma? With what illness? Did things start to change that now, 5 years later, 10 years later, 6 months later, I've never felt the same since? And if all we do is then cover over the symptoms with more medication, we're still not healing the root cause. All we're doing is cutting off our awareness of what it is that we're feeling. If we don't feel uncomfortable, that's considered healing. That's not healing at all. That's just cutting off our awareness of our own experience.
Mm. I that makes so much sense, Dr. Marissa. And also, um, hmm, I'll also bring a bit of, the next part of nuance here, that some might argue that relying too heavily on self healing, it could lead people to neglect important medical care. So how do you respond to the criticism, I mean, if any, that being your own best medicine, it can unintentionally dismiss the value of professional help?
So again, I'm not suggesting that people do not seek lab work to figure out what's going on or an opinion into what might be happening. But there's a difference between seeking an opinion or even gaining a diagnosis and then relying on that outside in approach to heal. Because my argument is it's not healing. Most of the time, when we engage with that outside in medicine, it's not healing. It might stop the symptoms, but that doesn't heal the root cause. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with seeking lab work, with seeking an opinion, with seeking advice, but remembering that you are the main expert, and the medical and holistic practitioners around you, they are contributing to you, but they don't dictate or run the show.
Okay.
About a decade ago, if not a little longer, family medicine in the United States decided that the way that they believed that medicine should be practiced would be with the patient at the center, like the center of a wheel, and
Okay.
healthcare practitioners and doctors coming off of the spokes of the wheel and surrounding the patient. But the patient is at the center of their own care. And I would tell you that that is almost never carried out in modern medicine, where the patient stands at the center and says, yes, I'll agree to this. No, I don't want that. I'd like to try this first. I don't want that medication. I'd like to try homeopathy or herbalism first. That is not the way it happens. What patients are told is that if you don't do what I tell you to do, I will release you from my practice. That's what they're told. So again, it's not about not engaging in care. At no point do I say that. In fact, I would try to send my patients from my holistic practice to their medical doctor to get lab work done, especially women, especially around perimenopause and menopause, because I wanted to see where were their hormonal levels, what was happening with their cardiovascular system, what was happening with inflammation in their bodies. And almost every single time in rural Canada, their medical doctors would say to them, well, I don't know what to do with your hormonal results, so we're not going to do the test.
Oh.
Okay. Or a woman would go in having really increased bleeding because she was in her 40s. And a medical doctor would immediately say to her, and this happened over and over and over again. This was not once or twice. Why don't we just remove your uterus? You don't need it anymore.
Wow.
As though a part of our body has no use other than that one use, which is not true either. But the answer is either cut it out, burn it out, or medicate it away. And that is completely disregarding our human experience. The way that I have always engaged with the medical system is that if I can't figure out the diagnosis myself, and I'm a very good diagnostician, but I don't have access to all of the tests, I don't have access to all of the equipment, that I would very clearly go to my medical doctor or my children's pediatrician when they were young and say, help me figure out what I'm dealing with so that I can go and find the way that I want to address it. And my children, who are now young adults, grew up without ever having antibiotics because they didn't need them, because there were other ways to address things. I would never put them in danger, but I would always try something else first before I would take a pharmaceutical that would then completely destroy their gut flora and cause all sorts of other issues. That was because I had the strength of conviction to know that health does not look like one way only. It doesn't look like only taking pharmaceutical medication. That is a very recent story that literally started after 1913. But Asian medicine is thousands of years old. Plant medicine is thousands of years old. They existed for a long time before that. Yes, thankfully, we have antibiotics when we need them for severe bacterial infections. But before we get to that point, there are other things that we can try. I'm not suggesting you allow yourself to get gangrene without seeking medical care. But I'm suggesting that if you're actually paying attention to your own body, you don't usually get to that point because you know that there's something wrong. And you're either trying to address it yourself or you're going to get help with it. So it's just a very different mindset. And it's one that is far more empowering. And it's one that also prevents this, there's no way to heal but this one way, because that is a very oppressive, aggressive, and disempowering belief system that humans have. It teaches us that we are somehow flawed from birth, that we are somehow incapable of taking care of ourselves, of engaging in the world without this external force. And that is patently untrue. It's something that we've been conditioned to believe in order to keep us disempowered and relying on a system that makes billions and billions and billions of dollars off of our disempowerment. Does that make more sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Dr. Marissa. And you know, there's definitely a sea difference between fix me and help me fix myself. There's definitely, and you explained it with you know, the facts. I completely agree with that. That definitely makes sense.
Yeah, the
Um,
the last thing I would do would be to tell people not to seek care if they need it. But simultaneously, as you're doing that, if you've just been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, we have got
mm,
to take a look at your lifestyle and then look at your belief system around your lifestyle. If you're not willing to change your diet, if you're not willing to exercise, where does that belief system come from? If you've just been diagnosed with cancer, it doesn't usually, we're seeing a little more of stage 4 cancers diagnosed out of nowhere right now, but usually this doesn't come out of nowhere. And,
mm,
if you're somebody who had a very difficult childhood, if you were in abusive relationships, we need to look at the correlation and the connection between our emotional health, our spiritual health, and how that then shifts our body toward a state of dis-ease as opposed to vibrant wellness. That's what I mean by you are your own best medicine. We need to look inside, not to ignore assistance around us, but to actually claim responsibility for our own experience so that we can heal what needs to be healed.
totally, totally. And let's talk about the next steps, the options available. Like Dr. Marissa, you integrate modalities like bioenergetic healing, essential oils, herbalism that you mentioned in your work. So for someone who is just starting out, uh, what's one or maybe more than one, simple daily practice they could begin right now to feel more connected to their own medicine?
Truthfully, before we bring in anything else, what I would
Mm,
say is it's sitting with our own breath, sitting and breathing and feeling our bodies, remembering that we have a body, especially if we're feeling pain or discomfort or unwell. The tendency is to want to be out of our bodies. And we're very much in our minds. We're very much in fear. We're very much in discomfort. And so much of what is going on around us in the world um, is really anchored in fear these days, fear-based messaging everywhere, especially if you cannot turn off the news or your devices or whatever else. And that
no,
also keeps us in a place of not healing. We cannot be in fear and growth at the same time. We cannot. And so, I mean, to have a moment of fear, a moment of worry, we're all human. But if we are dwelling in fear of finances, of government, of war, of invasion, of whatever else, we are not in a place of growth. And so to sit first and foremost, and this is completely free, there's no need to buy anything, but to start getting in touch with just being in our bodies. For some people, that might look like meditation or prayer. I would say for a lot of people in the West, meditation is much more foreign to them and they don't know how to still their minds. And so, even just sitting, eyes closed if that's comfortable for you, or a soft gaze if it's not, one hand on your belly, one hand on your chest, and focusing on your breath slowly. You don't have to do it a certain way. It doesn't have to look like a certain number of counts in and a certain number of counts out, or box breathing or anything else. It's just focusing on feeling our breath moving through our body and then starting to ask questions. As I breathe in, does my hand over my chest rise and fall? Do my lungs expand and contract? Does my hand over my belly rise and fall? Am I breathing into my stomach, or is all of my air just in my upper chest? Can I make that move? Can I take a slightly deeper breath? How does that make me feel? Does it make me feel panicky? Does it make me feel winded, like I don't have enough air? If it does, can I harness some of my breath in my chest and visualize it, picture it moving into my stomach? Picture it moving with ease as opposed to force. Can I start to feel like when I breathe in, my chest and my belly rise? And as I breathe out, my chest and my belly contract. And that allows us to maybe be in our bodies, especially if we're in fear, we're in pain, we're disconnected. It starts to bring us back into this embodiment. It doesn't heal anything other than it starts to calm the mind so that we can start to feel less panicky, less, we feel less of the need to look outside of ourselves for all of the answers. Maybe as we're doing that, we can make sure that there's nothing in the background. If you want soft music that's not distracting, all right, but we don't have the news on. We don't have a show with fighting or gunfire going on. We don't have, if we need to go outside so we're away from children if they're in the house making a lot of noise, or, while they're at school, or do we sit outside in nature to do this and allow ourselves to start to feel connected to the natural space around us so it doesn't feel like us against the world? It feels like us as part of the world. It's a very simple way to start to do it. And then you can start to bring in other things, but we don't need to start with the other things right off the bat.
Wow. That is, I think, mm, there couldn't be more justification to this, because what you said, it is available to all, but you really gave uh, a clear cut direction into how we can actually leverage this. And because so many of us, we feel like, wellness is another thing we are not doing right.
Yeah.
But it's really refreshing to hear, Dr. Marissa, that it doesn't have to be complicated or so much, structured, or should take a long, long time, lot of research. It can definitely start from the idea of simplicity. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It absolutely can. It can. And I mean, there is lots of place to bring in homeopathy or herbalism or Ayurveda or anything else. There is room for that. There is room for really good therapy sometimes. There's room for prayer. There's room for all of these things.
Yeah.
But when I say you are your own best medicine, it has to start with us. It has to start with us getting still. It has to start with us quieting the noise. It has to start with us finding our way out of this constant fear that so much of the world has been in for a long time. I mean, look at the last 5 years. I don't think that people's nervous systems have actually decompressed. And then there's just one more thing and one more thing and one more thing. And so we're not being given the chance to decompress. And it's keeping people in this constant cycle of fear and response and fear and response. And because we feel weak and disempowered, we then give our power over to somebody else who might not have our best interest in mind. And so if you are your own best medicine, you are also then looking at, how do I take care of myself first and foremost in order to heal, in order to then have something to offer to my family, my community, my country, the world. The idea that we need to take care of everyone else first while we are so incredibly unwell means that we are giving from a completely empty pot.
Exactly. Yep. Totally.
We
Totally.
have to start with this inside out, not outside in approach. That doesn't mean that we're selfish. That doesn't mean that we don't care. We care deeply,
Yeah.
but we each must be responsible, radically responsible for our own selves in order to then be able to provide our best to the world and heal what is going on in the world, so that we're not just pointing fingers and yelling at each other and screaming and fighting and threatening to cancel people on social media. And I mean, this is insanity. It is literally insanity going on. We need to find a way through this. We need to find a way to become healthy in mind, body, soul, and spirit, so that we can recognize the beauty and the power of this human family that we have, and then take care of the world that we live in.
Mm. That is really, really empowering, Dr. Marissa. And if our listeners they would like to connect with you, what would be the best way?
Right now, the best way is actually through my website, which is elementalhealingarts.life. Um, I've got I've got a few things that are coming out shortly. There's a really lovely blueprint on there called the Energy Elevation Blueprint, which just helps give people little tools that they can use to shift their energy into something that feels more vibrant. And there are a few more tools that are coming out in the next month. And through that, you can then also connect into my Instagram page. So for now, that's probably the best bet.
Awesome. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes. And Dr. Marissa, um, thank you. I mean, this was such a powerful, powerful take on the wellness, and of course, exploring the beauty of our bodies, our minds, the holistic beauty. And thank you so much for reminding us that self healing, it isn't about rejecting outside help. It's about recognizing the power and wisdom which is already within us. So thank you so much for bringing this up, Dr. Marissa.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me on the show today.
And to all the listeners out there, if you are curious to explore these ideas further, start small. Check in with yourself each day and notice what your body, mind, or heart is asking for. Sometimes the medicine we need most is simply learning to listen. With that, I'm your host, Sana, and this has been the Mindful Living. Thank you.